Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hi, my name is Wes Bates, and I'm a panelist and occasional host over on the Great Game Debate podcast. The Great Game Debate is a conversational podcast about video games, where we have lighthearted debates about games and game-related topics. We also interview folks from around the industry, give each other sales pitches about games that we enjoy, and play silly trivia games. But I'm not here to talk about the Great Game Debate. I'm here to talk about one of the best Zelda-likes that's ever blessed this planet. What is that game, you ask? Why, it's Ōkami from Capcom, of course. Ōkami is a 3D action-adventure game inspired by 3D Legend of Zelda games like Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask. The game first released in 2006 on the PlayStation 2 and was developed by the now-defunct Studio Clover, who also developed the Beautiful Joe series and the underplayed gem God Hand. Ōkami was directed by Hideki Kamiya, who directed such hits as Resident Evil 2 and Devil May Cry, and later went on to help form the action game powerhouse Platinum Games. Needless to say, the pedigree for Ōkami is fantastic, so it's no wonder the game's so good. Ōkami stars Amaterasu, affectionately known as Ami, the goddess of the sun who has traveled down from her celestial kingdom to the land of Nippon to cure the realm of a curse known as Orochi. Ami is incarnated in the form of a beautiful white wolf, the spitting image of a legendary wolf known to the locals of Nippon as Shiranui. 100 years prior to the events of Ōkami, Amaterasu, in the form of Shiranui, aided a local swordsman to defeat Orochi, a terrible 8-headed demon who was terrorizing the land. Orochi was sealed away in a cave, but, regrettably, he escapes 100 years later only to resume his reign of terror on the land. And it's up to Amaterasu to cleanse Nippon of Orochi's curse and put the demon away again once and for all. And so, the adventure begins. Okami's structure resembles that of many of the traditional 3D Zelda games. There are numerous towns to explore with secrets to uncover, and dungeons filled with puzzles to solve, all connected by large, semi-open hub areas. Many of the areas are closed off to Amaterasu as she begins her journey, and as her power begins to grow, she gains new abilities that allow her to progress to new areas. This is all pretty standard fare for a Zelda-like. What really makes Ōkami stand out is the visual style of the game and its use of the celestial brush mechanic. The game's art style resembles that of a Japanese ukiyo-e-style woodblock painting, and it's truly like nothing else I've ever seen before. While similar in nature to a cel-shaded design and appearance, the flowing, thick black lines that make up the characters and the world resemble brushstrokes, and the color palette in the game is vivid and captivating. Ōkami has a central theme of connecting to nature. Amaterasu is a sun goddess after all, and this is expressed perfectly by the art direction. For example, as Ami builds speed and runs through areas, flowers begin to sprout and bloom in her wake. When you cleanse the cursed miasma from an area, it explodes with color as grass, trees, and all manner of plant life spring to life, and the land is rejuvenated. This is really a game that you have to see to believe. No amount of me trying to describe it to you will do it justice. It's literally a painting brought to life, and few games have ever achieved such stunning art design like Ōkami has. I mentioned the celestial brush earlier, and it's one of the key mechanics of the game. At any point, you can hit a button to freeze time. Everything will take on this sort of sepia tone as the end of a giant paintbrush drops down onto the screen. From here, the player can control the paintbrush with the thumbstick, or with touch controls if you're playing handheld on the Switch version. You can paint lines all over the screen. Depending on the form that you paint, when you resume play, you can affect the world around you with your painting. For example, you may create bombs from thin air, change the day to night or night to day, create a gust of wind, or even slice through objects and enemies, all with a stroke of your brush. As you progress through the game, Amaterasu encounters members of the Celestial Zodiac. These are heavenly animals who teach Ami her abilities through brushstrokes and allow her to progress through the game. These encounters are very charming and funny, and never fail to bring a smile to my face. For example, imagine a tiny mouse pulling out a gigantic sword, and we're talking Buster Sword level size here, flailing it around like some kind of martial arts master. It's pretty good stuff. Anyway, the Celestial Brush is a fantastic mechanic that really adds a lot of creativity to exploring the world and completing the game's many puzzles, and it really sets it apart from other similar types of games. One of the main reasons I love Ōkami so much is the story and the diversity of its locales. It begins with the quest to take on Orochi in a small village, but along the way, there's tons of twists and turns I totally wasn't expecting. And the game takes you to so many unique and interesting places, it really surprised me in the best way possible. It has a ton of wacky side characters, too, that really add a lot of flavor to the game, like a sleepy bear who balances on an acorn, a group of warrior dogs who guard a shrine, an electric ghost, a fisherman who collects swords, a mole mafia, and a sexy tree spirit. It's all steeped in Japanese culture and lore, which is beautifully accented by the soundtrack, which is absolutely stunning, with heavy use of traditional instruments like flutes and taiko drums. The enemies are equally interesting and also pull from Japanese lore and mythology. Various types of demons, imps, and spirits are wonderfully realized and always a ton of fun to fight. The first time I played the game, I was watching the original run of Naruto while it was first airing in English, and so you can imagine how psyched I was when I was actually able to take on a nine-tailed fox in the game. It was so awesome. Anyways, despite her supernatural adversaries, Amy is no pushover. Outside of her fangs and the celestial brush, you have access to bladed discs, giant glaives, and my personal favorite, the rosary, which, depending on how you equip it, will either act like a whip or fire off bullet-like beads. The action is fast and fun, and leaves a lot of room for battling with your preferred playstyle, whether that's using heavy strikes from your glaive and summoning bombs to blow your enemies sky high, or staggering enemies with an electric whip and cleaving them in half with a stroke from your brush. Sadly, no game is perfect, and there are a few minor points I feel bring the game down a bit. The first is the character Isun. Think of him as the Navi/guiding companion character in Okami. All the Zelda-like games have to have them, right? Well, believe it or not, he's actually even more annoying than any of the Zelda companion characters. He talks a lot and is quite the lecher. If Master Roshi from Dragon Ball were a little flea man, then that's what you'd get with Isun. He's really annoying, and he can get pretty cringy at times. The game isn't voice acted, and the characters all speak like they came from an Animal Crossing game. You know what I'm talking about here, right? The characters all sound something like this. There is a lot of dialogue in Ōkami, and many of the cutscenes are unskippable, meaning you have to sit through all that chipmunk chatter of the characters speaking, and it can get a bit old by the end. But thankfully, that's where most of the pitfalls of the game rest for me. Other than that, I absolutely adore it, and all of its great points easily outweigh the few minor annoyances I have with it. Okami is also a very lengthy game. It will take you anywhere from 30 to 45 hours to complete the game your first time through, depending on how many collectibles and side missions you take on. There's a lot of meat on that bone, and it's a fantastic value. The HD version on the PS4, Xbox, and Switch usually runs for about $20, and the game's often on sale for less. So, if you enjoy a charming, stunningly beautiful 3D Zelda-like game, that, in my opinion, is actually better than many of the 3D Zelda titles, with a ton of things to do and a price that's a steal, then look no further than Ōkami. I hope you enjoy it if you decide to play it. Thanks for listening. You can find me on Twitter at @Mecharecca, that's MECHARECCA, and you can find the Great Game Debate podcast on YouTube, Spotify, or on your favorite podcast app. I'm Wes Bates, and until next time, happy gaming!
Nostalgia is one of the strongest forces in the human psyche and is responsible for the continued existence of some of our favorite fandoms. From the minds behind the Dole Up in Dreams podcast and Isolation Cast Voices from Quarantine, Saturday Morning Confidential takes you on a deep dive into the properties that helped influence the artists and creators of today. So whether you are a Goonie, a Gym Girl, a Digi-Destined, or you just want to return to Oz, new episodes release on Fridays bi-weekly starting January 1st of 2021, and join us on the Wednesdays after the main show for the Serial Killer Radio Hour, where we sit down with the people responsible for the toys, shows, and fandoms that you love. Now you can find Saturday Morning Confidential at certainpov.com/SMCpod or on your favorite podcast platforms. So don't forget to tune in for another deep dive into the files of Saturday Morning Confidential.
CPOV.
CertainPOV.com.